Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to the RTI Speed Tips with Bob and Chad, episode number 37. We're wide open. We don't have a real specific agenda tonight. A couple things I wanted to talk about was, of course, the bearings on the cups. We had a couple of issues, and I'm not really sure if all of the way the spring works on that right rear, if that's going to actually end up being a real decent piece. But I had another guy try it with a different grease, and like we had talked about on the last episode, this one that I have right here was one that he used that synthetic wheel bearing grease, and I think with the amount of wrap in that right rear spring because of the solid upper bar, that I don't know, it ended up actually breaking one of the pieces. But I told him, I just gave him another one, and I said, here, stick this in there, but make sure you use like that red grease and grease it a little bit better, and we'll see. So he isn't going to actually get to run till next week because the Stewart racetrack's not actually running this Wednesday. They're running a week from Wednesday. We'll see how it goes. But I'm wondering if there might not be too much movement on that right rear. We'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Other than that, what's new and exciting at Wehrs Machine?
Oh, we're just plugging away. You can definitely tell the season's in full swing as the Monday chaos is back with all the repair orders. So it's been pretty busy. Just getting the season rolling here.
Yeah, of course. You know, we my good buddy Austin McBurney that answers the phone and does all the shipping and everything. Welcomed a baby boy into his family on Saturday, and that's pretty exciting news. Sounded like it was kind of a long labor event, and so we'll see if he might be an only child or not. I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. But Austin was pretty excited about it, so we're excited. Won't be too long, and it'll be three of them little burrheads running around this shop here, because Rocky's got a little boy now, and Bobby's little boy, and Austin's little boy, so it should be pretty exciting. One of the things that brought on is Monday, and Garrett got to be shipping manager today. I didn't know he could actually move that fast. I was pretty impressed. He was hustling her right along.
Flinging the old tape gun?
Yeah. I helped him out with some body panels at the end of the day. It's been quite a while since I've actually boxed up some body panels. And I remember how well I like shipping them body panels. But we got that all done, and it was a super busy day. I mean, I was amazed. And like you said, you can tell because Iowa opened up, I think, 3 or 4 racetracks this weekend, and so the phone was pretty much nonstop all day. And it's always a good thing when you have a Monday like that. It's a lot better than having a rain out.
Yeah.
We got 85 or 84 degrees down here today with high winds, so it's extremely warm. And but the wind is a little bit burly this morning. It wasn't too bad today. Tonight, I guess it's not super bad. Did you guys get that hot weather up there?
No, it was about 60 something today, so not.
Oh, nice day.
Not real hot, but
yeah, we went yesterday. It was actually chilly, and today was kind of warm.
I see in Wisconsin today it was raining, snowing, sleeting, and everything. So
just depending on what part of Wisconsin you were in, huh?
That's right. Yeah.
So you were in the good side of Wisconsin this time.
Yeah, sunny and 65, or
well, most 65. Yeah, sunny and 65. Yeah. Well, we got room for some questions. If anybody's got some questions, do want to remind everybody, of course, it's the 99 days to the 30th annual Harris Clash. And of course, the Harris Clash Race of Champions, sponsored by Wehrs Machine. Excited about that. we're really patiently waiting. 30 years of doing something has been a long time. So we're excited about going there and celebrating the 30th anniversary of that deal. We were hoping that might be a little bit of an extended deal, something a little bit added, but we don't really know for sure if we're going to be able to add anything yet. We haven't really got any of that finalized. I think, their Queensland's are, trying to get their season going, and they've been busy, and so we'll have to wait and see. But so that's going to be exciting. 30 years. Heck, that's longer than I was ever married to anybody. Even if you count all three of them together, what the heck?
Wow.
So that's pretty good. And participation's good. We're excited about that. There's a lot of interest so far already. Frank, solid pull rod sport mod, left to right with drive shaft pros and cons. It does, Frank, it's going to do the same thing as if you had a torque link in there. In my opinion, whichever tire you move it closest to, it's going to try to load that tire more. Say, for example, if you move it to the right side of the drive shaft, the rules basically state within an inch of the drive shaft. If you move it to the right side, it's going to affect the right rear a little bit more. You're going to get a little bit more side bite out of it. Car is going to be a little perkier on corner entry. If you move it to the left, the car is going to be a little bit more lazy on corner entry, but it'd be a little bit stronger coming off the corners. So either way, that's where it's going to actually affect it the most. Is you just have to kind of imagine whichever tire I move it closest to, it's going to have more of an effect. Russ, when running a soft left rear spring on a 3-link, you scale with the normal stiffer spring, set the bite, then replace the soft spring, preload it, and leave everything else alone. Is that correct? Well, that's kind of what we did, and we actually ended up scaling. It ends up being, when you change that spring, it adds quite a bit more bite. And we also, the thing, when we go to that softer left rear spring, we found we've had to go to a little bit stiffer right rear spring to compensate and keep to kind of help keep the side bite out of there. Because when you get that much left rear load, what's going to happen is you're going to lose a little bit of side bite. So you have to keep that in mind. But yeah, you're 100% right. That's how we've done it, and we practiced that car that we did. We had on the video the other night. We practiced it last weekend at Stewart, and in practice-wise, he really loved how the car felt and felt the car was good up off the corner and really liked it. So we're going to have to wait another week to actually see how that car races in a crowd, but we're waiting to see that. But that's what we did. Any ideas on the right rear wheel hop on an A-mod during the feature? Also, chunked out the second row from the outside of the brand new tire in the feature. Too low of air pressure is what caused that chunking out. What's happening is the tire's low on air pressure, and that actually might be part of your wheel hop, is because the actual tire's trying to create some sort of a bounce too. If you get too low on that, even with its beadlock, to me, that IMCA tire, I've never ran under 15 pounds. 15 to 16 seems to be pretty good, because it does get quite a bit of load on it. But that's what we have found when that tire actually flexes, and I don't actually have my tire samples out here, otherwise I could show you. But when the sidewall buckles, what it actually does, Garrett, I actually think they're in this unit here. When that tire actually buckles, it kind of, the sidewall kind of buckles, and then so that outer edge rolls under, and then you've got that nice sharp razor edge second row in, and it just rips it apart. But that's okay, don't worry about it. But anyway, that's with a brand new tire, that's pretty common. So I would have to believe low on air pressure. IMCA Sport Mod, what pull bar length do you recommend? Well, in the Sport Mod, we kind of run the same things we do in our modifieds. It's, usually right in that 28-inch range. Somewhere between 28 and 30 inches seems to be pretty good. I think that all has to do with wheelbase and the amount of rear percentage that you have to make that car actually work the best. So I think that's pretty common. We've tried shorter pull bars. Didn't really like them. They're quick to react, but with our IMCA tire, you've got to be really careful not to break the tire loose, because once you break it loose, it's hard to gain traction back with it. 3-link car, both springs mounted on top of the housing, solid pull bar. I missed the question.
It's farther down, I think.
Here.
3-link car, solid pull bar, springs on top. Would you mount the shocks behind or in front of the housing? In my opinion, I'd probably mount them behind the housing. If it's an IMCA car, you have to run it behind the housing. But I like, I like mounting them both ways. For traction wise, if your rules don't dictate where the shocks have to be, putting the left rear shock in front of the housing actually can add traction to the car, because as the rear end wraps. The problem we ran into was to get some of the guys that have trouble trail braking the car, to keep the car kind of up in attitude, we have to run sort of a stiffer shock. Well, then when the rear end wraps, it loads that shock too quickly and kind of can create sort of a mid-corner push. So when the rule stated we had to go behind the housing, I actually felt that helped that mid-corner tightness quite a bit. So I like them both behind. What are the pros and cons of running a soft right front spring on a Sport Mod? Well, anytime you run a softer spring, you have the chance of possibly bottoming out, but you also have the chances it can take a little bit of forward bite out of the car, especially on a 3-link car. A 4-link car, you've got your links that are working for you, and it's a little bit different opposition, because with the links, you need the link angle to create traction, so you need a softer spring to get over on the right front to create that angle in that left rear. With the Sport Mod cars, I don't know if that's as important. So we've got some guys out there that are running 500-pound springs in their cars and seem to be doing fine. But the ranges that I see the most in the Sport Mods, 500, 525, and 550. That's the common numbers that we see. For stock cars, I'm running an 1,100-pound left front spring and 1,000 on the right front, 200 left rear, 225 left rear, 200 right rear. Any idea how I could get more drive in the car? Should the left rear be a 175 or a 200 and 900, or the right front, would that help get drive? I wouldn't soften the right front probably, but I think it would be a strong idea to go softer, like that 175 on that left rear. But I think you need to try up in your right rear spring. What happens is we get to the point where we get too soft on that right rear and the car gets lazy and it just kind of hangs over in the right rear and it doesn't really do anything, because it's the old adage, the stiffer spring gets the weight. So if we've got a softer spring, even though it's a 200-pound spring, a softer spring with a 2,900-pound car, technically, I think you should try a 250 right rear. I think you'd be real happy with it. I think it would create a little bit less roll, give you a little bit more side bite, which if you get a little bit more side bite, usually that lets the car get more forward bite because it's keeping it on the left rear more, because it's not rolling off the left rear to the right rear as much. I had 15 pounds of air pressure in the right rear. I had never seen it do that before. Just curious. Well, Mike, Question for you: was that a 3-inch offset wheel or a 4-inch offset wheel? Lift arm versus pull bar, pros and cons for which? I'll let you. You want to answer that one, Chad?
Generally, the lift arm is going to be freer and not have as much traction. The pull bar is going to be a tighter apparatus. Going to have always going to have more traction. So, I mean, both seem to work pretty good. IMCA can't run a lift arm, obviously, but the open cars tend to go. The USMTS guys are going lift arm, pull bar, lift arm, pull bar. It seems like, but you're definitely going to have an overall tighter race car to run a lift arm than you are with a pull bar for sure.
And I've found that the lift arm cars tend to like higher bank racetracks, tend to like racetracks that generate a lot of load on the car, and actually they work really well. But the lift arm principle is it's trying to lift weight from the front end and take it to the back end, where the pull bar is actually taking the weight that's on the back end and just actually loading it harder. So traction-wise, Chad, like Chad just said, I mean, a lift bar car is going to have more traction. You get some shorter racetracks, some flatter racetracks. I think a pull bar's got a definite advantage. Last week you mentioned red and tacky grease, good stuff. Schaefer's makes a fifth wheel molly grease in a spray can. Really a great product, sticks real good. I use it on slip yokes to keep them from rusting, where the yoke does not slide in. Most spray greases is really thin. The Schaefer's makes it a great molly grease. Well, thanks for the information, Dan. I appreciate that. Joey stopping by to say hi. How's everything going there, Joey? Are we keeping my old buddy KS out of trouble, or are you still getting in trouble? Chad, how do I get me a fancy sweatshirt? Well, I think those things are on the website, aren't they?
That's correct. All of our apparel's on the website at wehrsmachine.com.
Yeah. I purchased, and now for a sizable order, you maybe could work in a smoking deal. But it'd have to be a pretty good size order.
I like to throw in free T-shirts and sweatshirts once in a while with a larger.
Yeah. Chad does a good job of fixing me up with some of my apparel. I was actually going through my closet yesterday because I was complaining that my stuff wasn't fitting in there as well as it did. I think it has to do with I got too many clothes. So we're going to have to sort out some of them. But anyway, I purchased a 14 GRT that had been ran as an IMCA mod its whole life. I'm now taking the car and running it in UMP. What are the immediate changes from the get-go that you guys see changing that car over? Honestly, if it was an IMCA car, I don't know. I'd probably consider putting the tubular lower A-frames on the front. And I think Chad makes those, and GRT makes those. They just are a little stronger and a little better. But the rest of the car, basically, other than changing your tires and stuff, there's not a whole lot of changing that we would do. Maybe a little bit different pull bar depending on what pull bar came with the car, but pretty much it's pretty easy to take an IMCA car and update it to run other sanctions. Sometimes it's more difficult to go the other way. Mike, it was a 3-inch offset. Okay, thanks. I was just thinking, well, maybe if it was possibly a 4-inch offset, that could have been part of it. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like you had the right air pressure. Sounds like you had everything right. So I'm not sure I really understand what could have been happening there, but it had to have been rolling on the right rear pretty hard.
Maybe the gauge thing, Ben talks about the air pressure gauge with the needle style versus the digital. I don't know what you got, but the old what side of the line are you on and who's setting the air pressures and when's the last checked it against the digital one, so maybe your gauge checked.
And that's a good point, because we actually had a customer that came in here, and my digital gauge that I have, that I bought when Bobby was running go-karts, so it's got to be 25 years old. And we just sent it in and had it recalibrated and everything. And then we had a customer bring in one of his other gauges, a needle style gauge, and it wasn't a real expensive gauge, but I think it had been dropped a few times, and it was 2 pounds off compared to my gauge. So yeah, that's a possibility too. Check your gauge with somebody else at the racetrack, just to make sure that something goofy's not going on there that you don't know about. Denny, 4-bar placement on the bird cage for a dry track. And how does it change the handling closer to the axle tube compared to further away from the axle tube? Go ahead, Chad.
Well, I mean, generally you would start in the 4.5 up, 4.5 down. Indexing the top left rod down closer to the axle tube is a pretty popular change, and that speeds up the index on the left rear to build traction and help the car turn on entry. Spreading the bars out, getting them farther away from the center line makes the cage lazy. So possibly on the right rear, you would spread the right rear bars out and slow that cage down just a little bit, make it act more like a 2-link car. In the dry slick, some guys are doing that. So kind of just depends on the situation and what you want to achieve. But closer to the center line is going to index quicker, and farther away is going to index slower.
Yeah, it's just all about the timing. When you're closer to the axle housing, things happen quicker, and when you're further away, they happen less. Andy, I bought a car, IMC car, that has 20-inch tall springs on the left rear. I know the kid number that they want, however, don't have a spring smasher. Is there a way to figure out how much I need to squash a 16-inch spring to generate the same load? Do I need to go up in spring rate?
Well, load is load. Doesn't know how tall the spring is. So 500 pounds of load is 500 pounds of load. It could be a 10-inch spring or a 25-inch spring. So, if you know how much the 20-inch spring is collapsed, you can convert that into how much the 16 would be compressed, collapsed, basic, just basic math, distance times rate.
Yeah, because if you have a 20-inch, 100-pound spring, it's 100 pounds per inch. So if that was the case and it compressed at 5 inches, that means you got 500 pounds of load on it, which is not going to compress it that much. But it's going to probably compress it maybe 2.5 inches. So that means it's got 250 pounds of load on it. If you go to a shorter spring, it's just changing the location of where the spring's mounted. It's still going to have a 100-pound spring. It's still going to have the same amount of load, just like Chad just said. That was a pretty nice comment that Kevin had for us this morning. I thought that made my day first thing in the morning. Nice quick email from Kevin out there in Michigan. Thanks us for Chad and I for doing this show and all the help that we've given him. And he's been to the RTI class a couple times. And so it's been pretty interesting watching his growth over the last 3 years since we've known him. And like he said now he feels like he can go anywhere and be a competitor. And so once again, I actually get to thank you personally here, Kevin. That was a nice comment. Made my morning really well. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Chad, 2020 Shaw car with 4-link measurements. They suggest the bird cage is still indexed into the spring according to the level indicator. Should this stay level?
So no, you don't want it to stay level. I'm reading the second one there. There's a kind of a next question there too, is the same. So the cage index, the zero index. So zero index is just, it's kind of a myth, but the theory is that when the 4 bars get to the bottom of the travel or the car's in hike, that the 4-link rods are at 6 and 12 o'clock, meaning zero index. But the cage still indexes into the spring to build traction. So what they're saying there is at ride height, they want it indexed into the spring, probably between 0 and 3 degrees into the spring at your scaled ride height measurement. And then as you hike and index into the spring, it's still going to index, 15 to 20 degrees, depending on how you're set up. But the zero index thing was just kind of, in my opinion, named wrong. We just followed suit, and it should be called compliance or something different. But so the zero index just kind of, the 4-link rods being at basically 0, but the cage is still indexing into the spring. So,
and I think their 3 degrees is a very reasonable amount. We actually index our stuff 5 to 6 degrees, so we're a little bit more, but that's okay. Anyway, so Penn Ohio type Pro Stock on late model tires, tire temperatures. Darn fly. Tire temperatures, that's what happens when the weather warms up and you open up the doors, you get them blasted flies. There's always a good and a bad to everything. Anyway, Penn Ohio type Pro Stock on a late model tire. Tire temperatures after a race was 85 on the left front, 110 on the right front, 100 on the left rear, and 135 on the right rear. What's a good target temperature for balance? Well, I'd have to say, buddy, you hit it pretty dang good, because I've always tried to get my left rear and my right front as close to the same temperature as I could, because I felt those two work together. The right rear is always going to run about 20 degrees warmer than the left rear, 25 degrees. And it's all because and where tires get temperature is actually with the sidewalls moving. So when the car goes in the corner and that tire, even though you've got X number of pounds, it still will wrap underneath the rim. So you're really working this tire sidewall a lot. So that's actually where your temperature is coming from, or a lot of your temperature is coming from. And so that's why I always, if it's 25 degrees more than my left rear, I think that's pretty reasonable. So, Eric, I think you've got a pretty decent balanced race car there. That's pretty good. Dana, hello, Bob and Chad. On an open UMP motor in a M30, what is the split you look for in the tire temperatures on a dry slick racetrack? Well, actually, Dan, the temperatures that Eric has there is pretty decent. Now, I had a guy today tell me that he ran his right rear tire was 235 degrees and his left rear tire was 160 degrees. And my comment was, you must have practiced on a dry, slick, sandy surface, because in a practice session, if you could run that hot a tire, that's a pretty abrasive situation. So on a normal dry, slick racetrack, you're not, to be honest with you, you're not probably going to create as much heat as you think, because you're not spinning the tires, or you shouldn't be spinning the tires. You're actually more neutral on a slick racetrack. So I would actually go with, if my right rear is 150 degrees and my left rear is 120 or so, I think my car's pretty good. If it's a lot over that, you're either setting the car too soon, it's getting on the right rear too quick. You don't want that right rear running super hot. What happens is after they get to a certain degrees, they actually just fall off super bad, because they have a heat range that they've got to stay in. And I've always tried to stay under that, or within that 150 degrees. Sport mod bar placement on the right rear end, currently at 4.5. What happens when we move it down? Actually, I probably wouldn't recommend moving it down on the right rear. If you want more traction out of the car, I would contemplate moving it up rather than down. When you move it down, it's going to put more angle in that bar, and it's going to actually slow a little of the reaction time down. So, because we're getting it further away from, and yeah, you can go with the idea of leverage, but still on the right rear, I think you would have better success going up to 4.0, and I think you'd like the car better. Bo Partain, now if I'm not mistaken, he is the IMCA current National Sport Mod leader. And how's it going, Bo? It was pretty nice to see those pictures from you winning out there in Utah. That was pretty neat. How often do you guys recommend changing springs? Seems like I lose spring height every 10 shows or so. Right side, Bo, you're probably pretty realistic. You get as hard as we are on the right sides now, and especially on the right front, and you're running a little softer right front, that right front's probably 15 nights is going to pretty much be it. I mean, and I don't care whose spring company you are, it's not uncommon. And with that right rear, you could probably get 20 nights out of a right rear, but your 10 shows or so, wanting to accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish. And the thing is people complain about a spring going away, but what's the price of a spring? $65, $75. We pay more than that for a tire that's going to last one night. So, in my opinion, I think that you're right on. USRA mod. Car is tight in, pushes in the center, loose off. Yep, that'd be correct. Cannot radius the corner. How do you choose which changes you make? Right rear softer, decreased J-bar angle, left rear upper bar angle, left rear lower upper hole. Well, there's a lot of choices there. To be honest with you, I would tend to believe that there's a couple different things that can happen here. Now, and this is where you got to kind of make the old driver's got to have that feel. If you go into the corner and the car feels like it's really getting on the right rear, so in other words, you can kind of feel the centrifugal force in your right shoulder is kind of pushing down and back. That's telling you that the car's falling on the right rear. We either have too much J-bar angle. I would probably look at that first, raise that up. That would be one of the best things. Lower upper bar, the left rear upper bar downhole. I don't actually think I would do that. I would possibly raise the right rear bottom bar up a hole. That's going to create a little bit more steer. It's going to make a little bit of suspension stiffness, make the car roll in a little bit better. One of the biggest things that I've seen happen that in this particular situation, the rear end's too far to the left. The measurement, whatever your brand of car, wherever they say the rear end needs to be, I would contemplate moving it 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch to the right. Something like that. I've seen that happen in numerous times where you get the left rear too far to or the rear end too far to the left, and it just pushes like a pig getting in, and then it pushes in the front end, and then all of a sudden you finally get the car to break loose in the middle of the corner, and what happens is then it's snappy loose, because once it finally breaks traction, it just snaps the whole car. 235 degrees is a cup asphalt tire temperature. Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. That's pretty good. I do remember those temperatures. It's been quite a while since I've been doing any asphalt stuff, but I do remember that. Peyton, what's the pros and cons of running the top shock beside the pull bar with the same angle and length? Well, when you run the pull bar shock above the rear end, it's going to force the car when the car, if it's to the right side, when you get off the throttle, if you've got a stiff axle damper shock, it's going to load the right rear and create more side bite in that right rear. When we put the shock down beside the torque link or the pull bar, what it actually is doing is now all of a sudden we're trying to regulate the pull bar and slowing down the pull bar action. So it doesn't necessarily affect side bite from loading the right rear where it's way up above on the rear end. It's more of a control of the pull bar. Now, some guys, we did a lot of experimenting with it. I really couldn't say when we were all done and said that we really gained a lot. Some guys liked the way the car drove better. I felt that we could play with a little bit more rebound to slow some of the action on the pull bar down. So I think there was things that we could accomplish there. But in answering it to your question, it really is more controlling the pull bar motion than what it's actually doing like it would be up on top of the rear end. Smoother reactions. Bob, any experiments on inertia or J dampeners, any place for them in dirt racing? Well, I hate to say it, but I'm not even sure what those things are. Do you know what those are, Chad?
Air inverters, or I guess I'm not sure. J dampeners, like dampening the J bar? I don't know.
Boy, Ryan, you got me. I hate to sound unaware, but I don't actually know what those are. I've not heard of them, so let's put it that way. So they must not be something that's real popular in dirt racing because I haven't heard of it.
Elaborate is what he said.
Yeah, elaborate on what those actually are. That would be I would greatly appreciate it. Yeah, Bo Partain went up from Arizona to Utah last weekend and won himself a couple of races up there in Utah.
Cool. Hi, Peyton Taylor.
So how's everything going down in Arkansas there, Peyton?
They racing down there yet?
Well, I would have to believe so.
Jeff's probably kicking his butt.
Well, I seen on a Facebook post on Sunday night that Jeff managed to damage his phone, and so he wasn't going to be available for phone calls on Monday till he got his phone fixed.
That's why you didn't call me today. I was pissed. We were on an every Monday thing, so.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame him. I think his phone was out of commission.
Nice. Are you going to the World of Outlaws at Boone?
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to miss that. That's only 8 miles away.
Yeah.
Friday night and Saturday night, this coming weekend, the World of Outlaw dirt late models are going to be at Boone Speedway. Friday night, I'm assuming is like a couple qualifying A features and some qualifying shows. They pay pretty good money for the IMCA modifieds. I don't know what it is, but I heard it at one time and it was a pretty decent deal. I think it was like $1,000 to win Friday night and I think $3,000 to win on Saturday night for the IMCA cars. They're going to run a full schedule of the normal, the sport mod stock cars and hobbies along with the World of Outlaw cars. So yeah, I can't miss that. I think those late model cars at Boone Speedway is just going to be awesome in my opinion. Okay. Oh yeah. Well, that's all about a shock. Yeah, I could see where those probably wouldn't be legal in anything that we do. Okay, when looking at the spring table, how far below should the top of the rear springs be below the center of gravity height? Well, I really don't know if it's so much, I couldn't actually answer that as far as the center of gravity height, but I do know that it's definitely beneficial to have the right rear below the left rear. And so in relationship to the center of gravity height, I really couldn't actually answer that question, but I do know it's an advantage having the left rear at least an inch above, an inch to 2 inches above. Well, Peyton says that it's raining. Never answers it working, guys. Yeah, I tell you. that rain. We could use that rain up here. We welcome it. I'd actually wouldn't mind having that.
Very dry.
Yep. Those shocks are like a Formula One. They have a rotating weight that makes the shock valving like a strange momentum. Boy, Jacob, I'd have no clue about anything like that. They sound pretty cool, but yeah, that would never fly in any of ours. Penske uses them in some of their stuff instead of the oil dampener that dissipates the energy through the transfers the heat, converts energy to rotating cylinders, creates well, that actually sounds like something that could be sort of expensive too. When a car gets weird, where can get some, I spend money like on stuff I don't understand. Mike, that wouldn't be one of those things you'd want to spend the money on. Nope. Steve talked about the car. Tyler Brewing will be at Boone for the Outlaw event. Good. Pat's telling us hi. Well, he's a little ahead of schedule this time because it's not 7:50, it's 7:42. Hi, Pat. How you doing tonight? I'm quite sure you had a busy day today like the rest of us did. North Dakota could use some rain too. I'll tell you what, man, we could definitely use it here in Iowa. There's no doubt about it. And they're saying we might actually get a quarter of an inch tomorrow night, but I don't know. Sounds like old school friction shocks. Yeah, and to be honest with you, Corey, I don't know that much about it. Hey, Chad, we have some of your special items on our car. Haven't got to run it yet. Can't wait to try them. If with what we could a spring more preload. Sorry, I better start that one all again. What happens is when that screen moves and I've got my eyes dialed in. Oh. Chad, we have some of your special items on the car. Haven't got to run it yet. Can't wait to try them. If with what we have, could a little more preload inlet right rear or more spring on the right front? You got that? That was for you.
I'm not really sure what the question is.
Well, I wasn't 100% sure. Dana, I apologize. Maybe if you could give a little more clarification on that one, I'd sure would appreciate it. Donovan, pull bars, springs, or biscuits if the rule allows both, and why? Well, each one, to be honest with you, Donovan, there's so many of them out there that are actually very good products. And what I tell people on this pull bar deal, yeah, we believe we make a magic pull bar. Chad builds a lot of magic pull bars. What I have found that whatever combination works for the driver, and what I mean by that is, the bushing bars are great. The downside used to be to the bushing bars is the bushings would wear out very fast. So people got tired of, like when we were running some of the old style canister type bushings, 5 nights and the bushings would be bad. Well, it's kind of a pain to rebuild them. And so people kind of got tired of that. So we went back to the spring. So we've kind of been back and forth between spring and biscuits. And now we've got spring plus biscuits. And it's just kind of, if you run them both, I can't say that I like that setup now, like Chad's newest bar and our bar, where it has a combination of biscuits and springs. I really think that's a very good combination. And it's a very tunable bar, and they seem to get pretty fair life out of them. So the spring's going to give you a little bit more life. It's still not going to be put it in at the beginning of the year and run it 75 nights and then decide to change it. I mean, it's still something that, you need to keep up with and standard maintenance. 20 nights definitely needs to be looked at and everything re-greased and cleaned up. And if the bushings look like they need to be replaced, replace them. Yeah, Pat, I have to say, that's the thing. When people complain about the economy, Well, I'm missing it because it sure seems like we're busier than we've ever been, and
Just shut the
we
TV
don't.
off and watch the news.
I mean, we just don't have. I mean, I could use more help actually, but it's just one of the deals where I'm kind of afraid to add another guy because I've seen this deal go really good, and I've seen it kind of turn and go the opposite direction. So, and with it being seasonal, you just don't really know. But it's been pretty awesome. I thank all you guys out there for spending money because we sure appreciate your business. There's no doubt about it. Any suggestions on a pull bar angle and how far offset left to the right on rear end as the track goes slick throughout the night? In my opinion, I actually don't adjust the pull bar. I rather adjust the rest of the car. I put it in the center of the rear end, center it going straight forward. And we normally, I like 15 degrees of angle with a 28 to 30 inch bar. And that seems to be very consistent, short tracks, long tracks. I'm just afraid that there's so many things that you can do to your race car that are very, very minute changes that will have very positive effects. That messing with the pull bar, I think that just adds too much to the equation. Because one thing, you change the angle, you do this, you do that. How are you going to know which of those parts actually work? So you kind of got to keep something consistent. And I recommend leaving the pull bar centered 15 degrees. Very good place to start. On a Northern Sport mod, would a drop cup on the right rear be better since the 11-inch doesn't have enough coils? Well, actually, Chad's bar, the bracket that we use on the right rear, technically is a 1-inch drop cup, isn't it?
Well, they both have the same insert in them, so they're not any different. They both have the same insert in them. So to get
Okay.
the spring table difference would be spring height would be the only way to do it. The drop cup, we haven't made a drop cup with a solid mount just because you can do it with spring height so easy. But I mean, it's not out of the question, I guess. But you can't run a bearing cup, so you can't run the normal drop cup with the bearing in it.
Right.
But
when using the Wehrs load stick, what's the typical adjustment on the right front when the track slicks off? Change springs to get smash down numbers or same spring but adjust down numbers? What do you recommend? Spring is separate from the shock. There's times where when we could somewhat preload the right front spring, then we'd probably put a turn or two of preload in it. But I don't actually adjust the right front a whole lot. If it's track to track, say we go to a new racetrack and we know what our load number is and the car's not getting the roll that we want, then we'll go to a softer spring, get the car up on the right front more, but we go back to the same load number. So, in answer to your question, I would probably recommend changing springs and maintaining the load number. What's your opinion, Chad?
yeah, I mean, if you want to initiate motion, I guess your max number is going to be your max number. The thing you got to think about too is when the track slicks off, generally you're slowing down. I don't know, sometimes over a second, wouldn't you say, Bob? So
Easily.
if you're going that much slower, your car initially is probably not going to travel as far. So, and you need to rotate when it's dry slick. A lot of guys think, oh, I got to get traction, but you end up tightening the race car up and then you can't rotate. And then you got so much wheel in the middle of the corner that you got to saw it loose with the throttle. And then you only remember that you're loose off. So the right front's a place where you can definitely get into trouble by, mistuning. But maybe, a softer, more wound up spring with the same down number to get it to initiate the motion would be a better situation there.
Yeah, I would have to say that other than changing, normally what I actually do, Eric, is I change shocks, go to a softer compression. shock absorber on the right front. And the reason is because, like Chad said, we slowed our lap time slowed up a second and a half. So I want to get the car to roll in there as much as I could. But there's times where I've also seen the fact guys run, you get into a situation where a heat racetrack's super fast and super hard on the car. You're getting a lot of, down movement on there. And I've seen guys go to a softer spring when the racetrack got slick just to make sure that the car gets on the right front. You got to have the car getting on the right front to load the suspension on the right front tire. Plus, that gives you the angle on the left rear to load the left rear suspension too. So that would be my recommendation. When figuring roll center on the rear of a car with a J-bar, is the roll center located halfway between the J-bar mount on the chassis and the rear end, or some other place on the rear end, like halfway between the spring mounts? Well, Les, I hate to say that's one that's above my head. I've always kind of drawn this magical picture in my head where I draw a line from the top of the left rear tire down to the bottom of the right rear tire. So now I've got this angled line this way. Then where my two pivot points are on this J-bar, it seems to me like I've always found that if I get the J-bar on the rear end, if it gets closer to that line, I get a lot more side bang. So I'm believing the fact that it gets to rolling more on that right rear. But to give you an actual scientific